Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to episode 4 of the HNE Show. And this is actually a really interesting show because I think in terms of, podcasts and, shows like this, it's very rare we get back-to-back episode kind of continuation in terms of both topic and guest and just the whole thing all together. So if you couldn't tell by the description and slash or depending on where you're watching it, the contents, the visual that's applied for the video version, we are joined yet again by Jackson from Full Circle, editor-in-chief over there. Jackson, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we get more into it.
Yeah, if you listened to last episode, I said something at the end, and I think it's fair for me to have come back to discuss what I talked about in last episode. And to just put it simply, I am here to eat crow.
Yeah, so the last episode, very, very interestingly, we talked about the whole Snydercut at the time rumors, since that's been something mentioned by tons of places for like the last few years now that, they were going to be doing this, that there was footage there, waiting to be released, basically, just needs a little bit more work on it. And we mentioned it in our discussion in the last episode that the biggest hurdle we thought, just from a business side, is the fact that this thing would cost the estimated amount at the time was $20 million. So we were like, for them to put $20 million to finish a film that's already been released to less than positive, reception critically and otherwise, it's just not a thing they do. To do something like this changes the entire landscape of film. For the most part, not only with that genre of film, but I think it's fair to say it changes the landscape for almost any film, especially big budget blockbusters that, have creative differences between the studio suits and the directors and the writers and stuff like that. And then you get what you get once the suits, if you want to call it that, are replaced, which happened with Warner. So yeah, it's interesting. Basically, we haven't said it yet, but if you couldn't tell, and if you've been living in a cave for like the last day or so, during the Man of Steel watch party that Zack Snyder had, near the end of it, it was announced that HBO Max in 2021 will be releasing Justice League, or the Zack Snyder version of Justice League, also known as the Snydercut. And some brief details that we currently have on it is that it will be a 4-hour film or about 6 episodes, in a miniseries kind of format. I guess that's still up in the air. And it will cost about $20-30 million. The original post-production crew is being brought back in to score the film, to do some editing cuts, to add finished visual effects. And cast members, I guess, are also set to reprise their roles, not shooting new scenes in person, from what we understand, but at least recording extra dialogue here and there. How that will look for certain scenes that Zack has been on the record saying still needed to be shot for reshoots, that remains to be seen, but maybe they are holding out hope in some way, shape, or form that once the Corona stuff's taken care of, probably scenes that would be more in the later end of it, especially if they're going to be doing it episodically, maybe they're holding out hope they can fly out like 1-2 people at a time to film some stuff. But according to Snyder, he says, and I quote, "It will be an entirely new thing, and especially talking to those who have seen the released movie, a new experience apart from that movie." And he says he has not watched the Joss Whedon version, but from what he's heard from others, he thinks the audience probably saw 1/4 of what Snyder actually intended, or what he actually intended. And he also says that he never thought this would happen, going as far as saying, and I quote, "I always thought it was a thing that in 20 years, maybe somebody would do a documentary and I could lend them the footage, little snippets of a cut no one has ever seen." So, Jackson, before we keep going down the kind of hit list of facts, so to speak, and information, what is your initial reaction, like your thoughts to this? Obviously, eat crow and all that stuff, but it's here now. It's real.
Right, we can sit here and talk about it, and to back up what I had said last episode, it was that I didn't believe it was going to happen. I didn't think that WB would pony up and give him this money and do this thing. I just thought there was too much going against it. I just thought it was a lot of hearsay. And, you know, every few months we get like this fire about, oh, he's doing a Q&A, or, oh, he posted something ominous on social media. It's clearly the Snyder Cut is coming. This past week had been like the most we'd gotten of that kind of stuff. And I was, you know, it was tough to kind of wrap around, but I was like, I still don't believe it. Like we've been through this so many times. I'm not going to go in. I'm going to go in skeptical. I'm going to go in completely skeptical. And I did. And to my surprise, I was wrong. And like I said in the last episode as well, I want to see this. I want to see this vision, and I want to see what Snyder had, and I want to see him be able to finish it. And seeing rather than them having to cut it into a 2-hour movie and release it like that, seeing between 4 to 4 hours cut up, or, you know, the entirety in a movie is fascinating. It's something that I am incredibly interested in seeing. And I mean, listen, it's shocking for sure. It's completely shocking, but I welcome it.
Yeah, something that really stuck out to me during this whole process is he's done a few watch parties, and I'm really curious if, you know, so to give some more context on what, you know, what happened behind the scenes, a version of the Snyder Cut, whether it's what Zack Snyder would settle on once things are released next year or not, it was shown with unfinished effects in black and white to Warner Bros. And HBO Max executives in February, before the whole coronavirus stuff was as, I guess, at the height as it is today. And everyone, I guess, was super pumped up about it once they left the showing, which is a huge deal because reportedly with the previous executives, whether this is the same thing Snyder showed them before or not, beforehand, executives were not thrilled about what they saw. They were very dismissive of it, and they worked very aggressively to change things creatively from what Snyder showed them, that test footage, that screening, if you want to call it that. So I don't know if Snyder has been tweaking things here and there, and I don't believe him all the way when he says he hasn't seen the theatrical version, just because there's no way he hasn't at least been told so much detail about this movie and heard about this movie on social media. I mean, like, it makes it hard for me to think he hasn't seen it due to that. But anyways, the new Warner Media CEO, Jason Kilar, is a big Snyder fan, actually. So I'm not surprised if details come out from trades later on that, you know, this new Warner Media CEO actually played a big part. And he even tweeted about it, saying this is for the fans, and the fans did this, and it's worth noting that he is one of those said fans. So, you know, it'll be really interesting to see this. But with it being on HBO Max, HBO Max is releasing, I think, next week or this week, as of we're recording next week. Yeah, and it will be, I think, it's $12 a month for like an initial period, basically kind of a early bird special, if you want to call it that. And afterwards, going forward, it will be $15 a month, which is the equivalent of about 180 per year. And based on the fact that you'll need about $20 to $30 million to finish up the film, that's roughly the monetary amount of like 1 million subscribers to justify rough estimates of what HBO and Warner are going to be putting into the finishing of the Snyder Cut. But if you looked at it kind of in a different way, it's like if they're greenlighting a big budget series, like let's say a 6-episode series, like a Game of Thrones, if you will, they'd be spending roughly the same amount for, you know, really big projects. So they might be approaching it in said way. But it's also worth noting that they may be looking at the fact that when they released BVS Ultimate Edition for home release, it actually did really well, and it brought the BVS home grossing total to 78 mil at the end of the day. So I mean, that's, if it can do that, something similar to that in some way, shape, or form, it definitely justifies, you know, putting 20, 30 mil into it. The biggest thing is marketing, but I'm sure they can get sponsors to cover that kind of stuff for an event this big. But Jackson, this is huge. This can change the landscape of theatrical releases, because if a project like this does extremely well, I mean, there's massive implications here, and I think this is kind of unprecedented territory. But I think this kind of
development leans into a conversation that a lot of people have been having recently about whether studios should be putting first run movies on streaming from the get-go. Something like people have been asking for New Mutants. They've been asking for Mulan, Black Widow, things like that to come just straight to streaming rather than having to go to the theater to see them. I think obviously there's some cost to, you can't lose certain things, and you can't, bigger films aren't going to be able to do this. Major blockbusters, it's not going to be viable. But mid-tier to low-tier films can see maybe success they couldn't find elsewhere on a streaming platform. I think this is kind of a weird litmus test of it, where if HBO Max gets this huge bump in subscribers when the Snyder Cut hits, and it does hit even 30, 40, $50 million in additional subscriptions, I mean, you're talking about a massive win, like a mega win. And even if it's for just that 6-week period, that's 2 months of subscription base they wouldn't have prior. And who knows how many of those people you do get to keep around because you have certain things coming, like a Green Lantern, a Strange Adventures, a Tokyo Vice, the shows they have in development, where it's like Doom Patrol, to name another, that there's so many things that keep people around. Even if you get a small fraction of that, it's a win. It's a massive win. And really, you're kind of hedging your bets big here, but I think it could be a massive payoff. And like you said, it could change things. Could the Snyder Cut, go off like gangbusters?
Yeah, and I do want to actually correct something I said earlier when I said they would need roughly about a million or so subscribers to kind of justify the rough cost. That was assuming that people would be subscribed for 2 months, a 2-month period, not just a 1 month period. Just want to make sure I kind of clarify that. But also, I mean, they can make a lot of money from this on top, because you would think, right, some people, and I've been hearing this same thing for Disney Plus, right? Some people subscribe from the get-go, and then they let their subscription after like a month or two, kind of, they stopped it, they canceled it, and then they're going to come back later. Those who subscribe to Disney Plus for the Marvel stuff exclusively, they're going to come back later when WandaVision is coming out, and when, Falcon and Winter Soldier are coming out. Like, when those things are coming out, they'll resubscribe. So if something similar happens with Warner Media, then they could have, let's say, 1 million extra subscribers from the launch. And then those people, in a few months end the subscription because maybe they don't, for whatever reason, want to watch anything that Warner Media really has. They just want the Snyder Cut, and they might come back later. So then, Warner Media kind of gets double dippings, so to speak, in terms of that. But I think, what do you think about this? The whole, either it'll be a 4-hour film or 6-episode miniseries. I mean, what do you prefer in terms of the approach?
It's tough, because had you asked me, had this been like a documentary kind of look at the making, what the Snyder Cut was, like something like, they were just looking in the behind the scenes, like Zach alluded to, someone making a documentary about the making of the movie and what it all happened, then I would ask for a 6-part miniseries, something like that. Not to, I know we talked about The Last Dance last week, but like just something, drawn out, like a long form documentary series. But if you're giving me a movie, I think I'd rather take the 4-hour film rather than cut it up into 6 bits. And I understand that, to make money off of this, like, you want people coming back. I would understand them doing the 6-episode miniseries and just editing it in a way that kind of, you have to come around next week to catch the next episode or whatever. But to me, to consume it as personally, I would want it all at once. But that's, I'm a big fan. I cover all this stuff. I really want it all at once, kind of thing, where I can, get ideas flowing on how to cover it or break out stories from it or any number of things. And so that would be my personal opinion. But in terms of consuming it, in a broader stroke, I would suppose the miniseries would be optimal in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually thinking to myself, if I was, let's say, the HBO Max, the Warner Media exec in charge of this distribution of the Snyder Cut, I would do 2 different things. First off, I would do a few weeks in advance, maybe like a 4 or 5-part documentary, right, about the making of the Snyder Cut, because people would tune in to watch that. And I wouldn't focus so much on the drama from the previous attempts of making Justice League and stuff like that. Maybe you could reference it here and there, but I would just focus on this undertaking, because this is something that I feel like a lot of people want to see, how they're going to bring this to life. When you already have so much principal photography done, but you have to touch up CGI, you have to do some maybe extra voiceover work. Maybe Snyder decides he wants to redo some scenes. Does he fly actors back out? You know what I mean? Change things up a little bit to make it work. I mean, I would love to see that personally before I even see the Snyder Cut. And I think that'd be the kind of thing where you could build a lot of immediate hype, those coming weeks, just like how The Last Dance had you gripped week to week, wanting to see the next installment, even though we already know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like with the Snyder Cut, we already know it's going to be made. We already know it's coming out. But the journey is still really interesting. So I would do I guess a few weeks, let's just say 4, because a month has 4 weeks. So I would do a 4-part documentary if possible, leading up to the release of the Snyder Cut. And then I would do the 6-episode miniseries as well with the Snyder Cut. And then after the miniseries, the last episode's released, I would also give people on HBO Max, give them the option to also view it in a full theatrical way. So no, episodic cuts, just, once everything's released, all 6 episodes, you have 2 options, 4-hour version or, watch it episodically. So I think that's how I would do it. I think it's the best of both worlds in terms of if they want to milk this thing, get as many people subscribed for as long as possible just for this. Like, doing a pre-release documentary and then 6 episodes is, what would that be like? Definitely a solid 3 months of subscriptions.
I mean, hey, do that. Go even further. Do an after show. Get some of the actors back. Yeah. Have them come talk about it. You can milk this thing dry. And to be fair, I would eat it up too, because I want to know what happened. I want to know these actors' thoughts. I want to know what Jason Momoa, after it comes out. I mean, he's been asking for this. Him and Ray Fisher have been all over this from the get-go, asking about the Snyder Cut. I want to hear what they think about it after it comes out. You know what I mean? Yeah. Jason Momoa was saying, hey, I've seen the Snyder Cut. It's better. It's better than what we got. And he's been very, very adamant about that. So let him come on and talk about it. Like, let him, let it out. Bring them back together and have them talk. And obviously, I don't foresee Affleck being, super keen on that. But hey, I'm sure everyone else would be on board.
I 1,000% think he would. I think he would come back. As long as he doesn't have to worry about playing the role again, I think he'd actually be pretty chill.
I think it would be
if everyone else is there.
Yeah, if we were in, it's difficult because if we're in today's kind of climate, when we're all stuck in the house and everything, they could do like a Zoom call kind of thing, where you bring everyone together. But depending on as we move forward into next year, productions on other things and people have other things in the works. But I think you could get these people in a room and have them talk. Let Snyder sit down with the cast that he brought together and talk out what happened and, what this movie means to them and all that. I would eat that up too.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really great way to go about it. Have like, let's say our goal, right? We're business, right? Let's say we're business people working at Warner Media, working at HBO Max, and the Warner Media CEO says, all right, Jackson, we're doing this. How would you do it? This is Josh's idea, right? And let's build off of this or change this, whatever. I would definitely say, look, let's do a 4-part mini series documentary. Actually, yeah, 4 episode documentary, hour each if possible. Then we do the first half of the 6-part mini series for Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut. Episode 1, 2, 3. Then, like you said, do kind of like a halftime show, if you will.
It could even be like an hour-long, 2-hour-long special. It doesn't have to be broken up into episodes. Just have them sit down and talk, and maybe break down the first half and break down the second half. Same thing.
Yeah, and then after that you do the last 3 episodes. Then you do the same exact thing, for the second half, and then you release the whole thing if people want to, watch it in an entire, 4-hour single format. I think that would milk a solid 3 months of content right there.
And there's also, the possibility that they do release this on Blu-ray or on DVD.
1,000%
down the line.
They will. I 1,000%.
And hey, seeing BVS's money, if people don't want to subscribe to HBO Max, they will eat that money up buying it on DVD and Blu-ray.
Yeah, I mean, I think they will because they're going to want to do something where, I mean, they usually do this, I've noticed, but, Snyder especially, he loves the engagement. He loves being able to go into things. So I think when this is all said and done, they're going to release it on DVD. They're going to call it something like Justice League Ultimate Edition.
Or
And
Zack Snyder's Justice League is
yeah, Zack Snyder's
their
Justice
marketing
League
it, right?
Ultimate Edition.
And then
whatever.
hey, they'll have some exclusive behind the scenes, featurettes and stuff there too. A completely different thing, maybe.
Well, if I was releasing this on
From what we already
DVD,
got.
I would put that documentary series be a part of it. I would bundle that in the DVD that also, or the Blu-ray that also has the actual film, and then put in like a director's audio commentary or something, or director, cast and crew audio commentary, whatever they want to do, because this is for the fans. So I mean, in my opinion, not every fan's gonna get Warner Media, and not every fan's, or not Warner Media, geez, HBO Max. Not every fan's gonna get that, and not every fan that gets it will keep it forever. So someone might want the Blu-ray, so they can kind of one and done buy it, and then just watch it whenever, without having to get a subscription to something. But at the same time, the thing that, I mean, I'm just really curious, because certain things, like I know a lot of people are excited about Martian Manhunter, because General Swanswick is technically Martian Manhunter. That's been confirmed at this point. How are they going to do that for the for the Snyder Cut? Because that just wasn't filmed. So that's why I'm saying,
right. It was just a scene that was drawn, and it was an idea, and the same with. I mean, it's a lot of questions, because obviously we know they filmed some Dark Side stuff. They filmed some Green Lantern stuff apparently in the
CG
tag
too. So it's like you can.
Right, and they have to do that up, and then there's stuff with the Flash, that there was an unfinished scene that featured Kiersey Clemons that was released that they didn't finish either.
Right? At this point, she left the solo project.
Well, according to reports that they're looking to cast a new actress, so it may not be her choice. I know she appeared on a podcast last week. I'm blanking on who it was or where it was, but that she said as far as she knows, she's still attached to the role. But obviously, this film has been such flux. I mean, it's the same thing with Billy Crudup. He played his dad. Is Billy Crudup still around? We don't even know. But in terms of these actors that Kiersey Clemons being one who was cut from the theatrical cut, appearing in this, and then that question goes: is there a possibility where this movie is taken as canon and the theatrical one is not?
I think so. I think that's what you have to
I think
assume.
that's a very real possibility. I think there's a very real possibility where that is the case.
Well, yeah.
Where they take this as canon. Because Justice League has only been loosely referenced in things like Aquaman, I think they can go ahead with whatever they do here, unless it's... I mean, depending on how it ends, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Well, I would assume, for that question you pose, I mean, people, listening to this in the comments, what do you think? Do you think this would override the theatrical release of Justice League in terms of being canon? And my answer is yes, just because at the end of the day, what people consider canon is from the fans a lot of times. And the whole reason people were upset about Justice, not the whole reason, but a big part of the reason people were upset is because they didn't think it was Snyder's vision, and his vision is the canon in terms of this. So I think automatically, if Snyder is making his version of this movie as he originally intended, it automatically supersedes as canon, since it's his vision at the end of the day.
Right, and I mean, things like Wonder Woman and Aquaman could be affected moving forward.
Yeah. I don't think that
Aquaman 2,
because he was still involved with Aquaman, like James Wan.
Well, right, but I mean, like the trajectory of where they go potentially where maybe they lean heavier into the Snyder stuff after we've had all this stuff about it going away and them trying to move forward with it. I know that this can kind of transition into the Henry Cavill conversation.
Yes.
Given that he was present during the announcement, seemed very excited about it.
Well, we can push that back to the last.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that. I mean, I just think it's very telling that he was there, and I think that a lot of these actors are very much on board with Snyder's vision, as they were, and they've always come out and said that. I think that Ezra Miller was, and I think when Ezra Miller had that spat with with Goldstein and I'm blanking on the two directors they had attached, when he went to go write his own script, and apparently it was much darker with Grant Morrison. It was darker and it was more Snyder-esque. And that the directors wanted to do something more lighthearted, and they were like, Miller was trying to cling on to the Zack Snyder vision, and Ray Fisher's been very about it, and so is Jason Momoa, and so I think they would be very open to moving more towards that kind of style rather than pushing the way they were going.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note, supposedly Snyder had rumblings of this for a while. Like even before they did the screening, he had talked to Warner Bros. Execs. So I wouldn't be surprised if, to a certain extent, that was actually a part of it in some way, shape, or form, in terms of, Ezra Miller and the vision of the Flash movie. If maybe when the new suits came on board with Warner, if they, since, like I said before, the Warner Media CEO, the new one, he's a Snyder fan. He's a fan of Snyder's vision, Snyder's movies for DC. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that played a part in it, as well as, because they never explained why Ezra Miller won that creative battle. You know what I mean? Because it was very odd how it happened. It was very odd how it was resolved, I think, in terms of Ezra winning. I mean, it was
so much so that they had to. John Francis Daly was his name, and I forgot that he had to go, subtweet him on Twitter after the whole the incident with his the altercation he had with the fan. That he had to come out and say something about how he was upset about Miller's kind of taking over of the project there for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's something. It's definitely something. And I mean, we're going to talk about we're going to take a break from the Snyder stuff for a little bit, and we're going to talk about something else also in the DC realm of things, but we're gonna go back to this conversation afterwards, talking more about the future of the DC films now and what this can kind of mean going forward. Certain things like Suicide Squad Ayer cut, Man of Steel 2. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, check out the third segment. That should be it. But going to the second topic we have here, Batwoman, that role is being recast. And this is another, I don't know what's going on the past week, the past 7 days. Something is going on in the air with DC Comics properties, because some of the most unexpected things in the industry, recasting a lead after one season, announcing something, the scope of the Snyder Cut. I mean, these are things that don't happen, you know what I mean? And they're both coincidentally happening with DC.
Yeah, they definitely don't happen back-to-back days.
Yeah, and yeah,
in succession of each other.
It's nuts, man. It's nuts. But just to give some quick context for people, now I'm going to turn over to you, Jackson, because I feel like I've been talking too much. Ruby Rose, who portrays Batwoman in the CW series, will not be returning for season 2. It is not related to certain things, just to clear up some misinformation that might be out there. It's not related to her onset injury that she had that really hurt her back and actually, I think, put her at risk of paralysis at one point. Not related to that. It's not related, after all, it seems, to scheduling conflicts with reportedly people were kind of assuming Ruby Rose wanted to do more film work, like with John Wick, and they were just thinking that maybe, hey, that's conflicting with doing the TV show, so it makes sense she'd maybe want to do the more lucrative film career out of the two. It does not appear to be that as well. And yeah, Jax, I'm just gonna let you take it from here. I've been talking too much.
Yeah, so I'm definitely, in tune with all the CW stuff, and this definitely came as a shock to me yesterday. Ruby Rose was brought in prior to the Elseworlds crossover in 2018 to take over the role of Batwoman going into her show that would have premiered that fall, which did last year. So that series took off. I watched a good bit of it. I didn't end up finishing it. I'll probably end up having to go back now and finish it now. But what I saw, I very much liked, and the characterization of Kate Kane was something that was a draw and was interesting. What they were doing with the character in the show, it was definitely raw. It hadn't found its footing really, which happens in these CW shows. They don't all come out of the gate like The Flash and just have this incredible first season. Arrow's first season is good, but it's a little mixed. Same with Legends of Tomorrow, definitely on the lower end of first seasons. Supergirl's is really rough. But Batwoman had something going and had some interesting things going on, and especially in the finale, which sets up a fake Bruce Wayne coming in and showing the actor who will portray at some point I assume Bruce Wayne in the Arrowverse. So we have all that going on, and then out of nowhere, seemingly Ruby Rose just decides to walk away, and then it comes out today that it really wasn't her decision 100%. They were behind the scenes issue with producers, and she had She had her own issues, maybe acclimating to life, doing a 6th, 7th month shoot on a show in Canada that isn't really her style. And, I'll be frank, when she was cast originally, it came as kind of a shock to me. Ruby Rose is not your typical CW lead. When you look at a Grant Gustin and a Melissa Benoist, they were lower tier names who appeared on something like Glee, and then they were, picked out of that and brought onto a bigger, to lead a series. And Stephen Amell was a TV actor who they pulled out, and he's done some movie stuff since. But she, Ruby Rose was someone who was really into movie work, and she was, in John Wick 2, and people really, enjoy her performance there. And she was in The Meg recently, and she had a big role on Orange is the New Black, which is a massive Netflix show. It still might be Netflix's highest rated show. I know it was for a long time. So it's something like she was a much bigger name than something I was gunning for when it came to casting Batwoman. And then when it ended up that she was leaving, it was kind of a surprise that she would do that because of how open she was about how important the role was to her. And she came out, being a gay woman and all these things that were very, it was important to her to portray a character that didn't get representation prior to, the show. And it's really upsetting that, this happens. I mean, this is kind of unprecedented in the CW. They're really tight-lipped about their stuff, and they kind of keep people in house, and they like to cycle through actors and use people because they all, the CW flows in a very specific way. Tyler Hoechlin is someone who's been on the CW for a long time, and, there's other people who come in and out of these shows and appear on, guest starring roles, but this is something you just don't really see. And as upset as I am, I'm not really shocked because, like I said, when she was cast originally, I thought she was a bigger name than something that they would hope to get. And I think, maybe that caught up to them.
Yeah, and I was actually spot checking while you were saying it. So actually, Stranger Things broke the ratings record for TV shows.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Definitely makes sense.
Yeah, but no, with the Ruby Rose thing, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me is just to continue on the contact spectrum of things. According to TV Line, who has contacts, all over the place, but especially in Canada, which is a key place for CW shows, they say that it wasn't 100%, Ruby Rose's decision, as it's kind of being made out to look PR-wise. It was a breakup. She wasn't happy working on the show, and did that make her fun to work with? No. So everyone decided it would be in the best interest of the show and for all concerned if they parted ways. It just wasn't a good fit, which I think, if that's true, 100% true, and not taken out of context in some way, shape, or form, very mature of them, very professional of them, very smart of them to not make this some behind the scenes dramatic blow up. So I got to give credit for that, because that would be exactly what the CW would do if this was a show. You know what I mean? Like, they would make it as dramatic as possible, as, blowing up as possible, as illogical as possible. And I'm happy that in real life, they're, letting bygones be bygones, so to speak, not, trying to make things more painful than it has to be, both for Ruby Rose's career professionally and also for, I guess, the cast and crew of the show. But, the thing that makes me curious about this is they don't really say, any insiders and stuff like that, whether this decision of her leaving, of replacing her, recasting, if that was last minute or if that was a long form decision that was made across multiple weeks, maybe months, once it was pretty obvious that both sides A and sides B weren't really getting along, in this marriage. So I find that really interesting, because the plot line of season 1, especially near the end of Batwoman, and I'm going to let you speak more on this, but it involves Hush. And Hush is a character that is all about, in terms of like superficially describing him, face swapping and plastic surgery and changing identities. So I just find it really creatively convenient that if they want, they can pull the Hush card, pull the mouse card, and they can do plastic surgery as an excuse for Batwoman's new look, you know what I mean? To explain the recasting, so to speak. And if they want, they can go really crazy with it and really bend over backwards. And technically, it would make sense in the story. But I'm gonna let you speak more on that, because I know you're a lot more informed, on the CW Batwoman show than I am.
Yeah. So the first season so far had seen, spoilers if you haven't seen it. The villain is Alice, who is Beth Kane, is Kate Kane's twin. They were separated after a car accident, and Beth was taken in by this doctor who had a son who was deformed, and he spent his whole, the boy's whole childhood trying to find a way to switch his face with someone more, appealing, because, he didn't take his deformity. And she grew up with him, and they learned from the father how to swap faces. So several times throughout the first season, we've seen people swap faces using the boy's name was Mouse, and it's Alice and Mouse who are kind of the 1-2 of the evil duo on the show. And it wasn't until later in the season that Tommy Elliott, aka Hush, came into their story, and they kind of grouped up together. Elliott had been a friend of Bruce, and who kind of came to head with Kate for a minute early in the season, and then he showed back up later as Hush. And then, at the end of the very season I mentioned earlier, his face was swapped with Bruce Wayne's. Bruce Wayne obviously isn't in the show technically, but this actor has been cast to play Bruce Wayne, so at some point down the line it's likely that he'll take over that role rather than playing him as Hush. So yeah, there's a whole face swapping element, completely throughout the first season, and that's definitely a route they could take, given that this convenient storyline is there for them. I've seen people talk about this online, and I think it's a much, much better option. Is the actress who plays Beth / Alice, Rachel Skarsten. She's the best part of the show by far. She's a very good villain. She's an incredible character, and given the convenience that that Alice and Kate are twins, there is the idea that Rachel take over the role of Batwoman as well, and still allow them to be twins. It would be complicated for sure, because they already had an Earth 2 Beth come into the show. I don't even know if she's from Earth 2. She's from an alternate Earth during this after Crisis, and kind of throw a wrench in everything. So that would also add a weird element to it. But it's definitely an option, given that they have the best actress on the show, and she could absolutely come and fit in the role, given the family dynamic, I suppose. But obviously, I doubt if I had to put money on it, I bet that wouldn't be the case. Although I'm not, batting 1,000 this week, so we'll have to see what the situation ends up there.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, I guess, what they do with it. Kind of just. Well, I don't want to touch on it too much, because I feel like it'll dominate the conversation once I mention it. So I'll push it back. But I just think it's I just can't grip my head around it. I mean, it's very rare that you have such coincidences for like a departure like this, but to already have a whole face swapping villain, a whole face swapping storyline, and then conveniently you'll have to face swap your lead character. I mean, it's just kind of. I mean, the only thing that'd be more convenient in my eyes is if they did the Flashpoint, like if this was the Flash show, right? And they did Flashpoint. They did the season finale with Barry going into the Speed Force, being lost in the Speed Force, doing Flashpoint, whatever they want to say, right? And Wally's left there.
Right.
And then Grant Gustin leaves the show. And then it's like, well, it's so convenient because you could just basically promote Wally to be the Flash now. You know what I mean? That's the only kind of similar convenience I could think of in a situation like this. So I hope the CW rides with it, just because, they were saying they had footage still from at least like another episode or so that wasn't completed, because they ended up tying everything up as neat of a bow as they can. But I would imagine they might have enough footage, whether it's from unreleased episodes or from previous episodes, reuse it, which the CW loves reusing stuff, as they've done with every time the Flash runs.
You're not wrong there.
I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe reuse some scenes to, makeshift, create a opening scene that ends with maybe her getting captured and, eventually face swapped. You know what I mean? Like, all you need is a body double in the Batwoman suit for maybe a brief action scene. For any close-ups, just reuse some footage of Ruby Rose.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. For sure. They could pull that off. It's more about the viability of the fact that you're going to let your main character be face swapped and then just kind of ignore it. And, everyone else knows what kind of happened. It's so like, I think they kind of went about it the right way when Don Cheadle took over for Terrence Howard. And they were kind of like, they definitely on the nose just kind of said, hey, I'm here, deal with it in Iron Man 2. They just kind of, moved on, like we're done with it. I think that's rather where I would have them go. It's just kind of like, yep, I'm Batwoman now. We're moving on. That's just, everyone knows what happened. We're just doing it differently now, rather than kind of making it a story element and kind of making it really, really obvious that they're trying to deal with it. Because obviously this is a crap situation and nobody wants to be dealing with it. I would think so. Just kind of like bringing somebody in and just filling the role and just kind of letting it go the same way, and maybe switching up season 2 a bit to make it more fit the actress you bring in. It's definitely complicated. I mean, the CW's never really dealt with something this big since they recast the Sarah Lance character going from Arrow season 1 to season 2, but she only appeared in one scene basically in season 1, and then she became a role player in season 2, so it's not even close to the same. Obviously, because Ruby Rose had appeared in 2 crossovers in a whole season of a show, so it's very, very different.
I mean, so if all right, let's say I'm going to pose this question to you, but my side of it, if let's say I was the showrunner and I had to come up with 2 options to give the executives at WB for moving forward. Obviously, the first one would be what I said before, just do a face swap storyline. I mean, you're gonna already be changing the faces anyways. You can kind of poke some fourth wall if you do a whole face swapping storyline about how it's a new person in the role. I mean, you don't have to be over obnoxious about it, but it gives you some fun with it, at least a little bit, for the immediate beginning of it, and then you just move on and do whatever you want to do. But I think the second option that is available to them, if they want to take it, I know they won't take this, but in different adaptations of Batwoman and Batman comics in general, there have been different people that have utilized the alias of Batwoman. You kind of touched upon it by saying have her, fraternal twin sister maybe take on the role. Maybe they should do something like that. I mean, I don't know how they would do it exactly, giving maybe, Ruby Rose's character somehow some sort of heroic death. It would be a hard sell, I think, for a lot of people. Versus just recasting, but it technically is an option. I just don't think.
No, right, and there are two options on the show they could even use. They have Alfred's granddaughter. I think her name's Julia Pennyworth. She's like she fights crime, or not? She's kind of she's kind of like a secret agent kind of thing.
Wait. You're telling me Alfred Pennyworth's daughter on this show is a crime fighter?
I think it might be granddaughter. She's not. I think she's a spy, something like that. I know she's helped Kate before. They had a relationship at one point.
2 seasons before she becomes either her version of Robin or Nightwing or Huntress. I give 2 seasons. I know they've teased stuff that she may join the team and fight crime and stuff. And the other option is her love interest. I'm blanking on the name. I can grab that real quick. Is her love interest who works for her father at the Crows. Sophie was her love interest, and supposedly supposed to be their in game is what their what their ship, if for lack of a better term, would be another option. She's she also goes off and is basically like a pseudo cop in the world, so she's another option. Is it true that they're going to be doing Arkham Knight? I heard that at one
I'm not
point.
Sure.
I don't know if that's true.
I'm not sure they would go that far. I know they'll definitely, as the seasons go on, they're going to pull in more Batman stuff because that's what they have to pull from. But I'm not sure they'll go that far.
Okay. I mean, I think it would work because they did the whole if for people that read Detective Comics, I'm a big Tim Drake fan, so I was reading it when Tim Drake was the main character, when I think Tynion was writing it. Tynion was writing the series, and Batwoman was also prominently featured, and they had a whole storyline, and Batwoman's father basically had like this secret special ops paramilitary unit of more or less Arkham Knights. You could easily swap them out as being Arkham Knights, and I thought it was really interesting. So I was like, oh, they can easily do that as a storyline in the future if they want. Sorry, that was kind of a tangent, but
no, but yeah. The option's there for sure. They have the pieces.
Yeah, and something I wanted to touch on actually, you mentioned it, and so yeah, at the end of season 1, Alice puts a skin mask on Tommy Elliott, aka Hush, to make him look like Bruce Wayne, and the actor they have portraying, I guess technically Bruce Wayne, and for lack of a better word, you would imagine logically would also eventually be the unmasked, at least, portrayal of Batman. His name is Warren Christie. He was on The Resident and also Chicago Fire. Now, my personal opinion on them doing Batman on the CW, whether it's on Batwoman, Arrow, whatever show, I think they should have two different actors. One for Bruce Wayne, one for Batman. Because I think if you limit yourself to one actor for the role, it's going to make it really hard. Because what do? You know what I mean? If the Bruce Wayne actor goes away. And the way I kind of see it is how Star Wars has done Darth Maul. And we talked about this last episode with Darth Maul about how they have, Ray Parker as, it's Ray Parker or Ray Porter. I always get it.
Ray Park.
Yeah, why do I always get it mixed? I don't know. I don't know who I'm thinking of here. But anyways, they have the voice nowadays, Sam Witwer. He is the voice, basically, at this point, for any depiction of Darth Maul. And then, obviously, the body on live action is portrayed by the original actor, who also just basically did body work from Phantom Menace, and I guess Rogue One technically as well. So I think if they did something similar with, and the CW has done this before, with Zoom, for example. They had Zoom be one actor voice-wise and everything, and then they had, when he was unmasked, another actor. So I think that'd be the best way to go about it in terms of Batman, because that way, if you want to have Batman in the future, you don't have to bring the actor back. But that's just kind of a brief tangent I just wanted to mention. Also, I think it works really well because you can have a really great dynamic, physically speaking, because you could have the actor portraying Batman, whether it's a stunt actor or whatever, just be this really jacked dude in the suit. And then, of course, you could have, Warren Christie just focus on the Bruce Wayne aspect. But, I don't know. I just felt like I had to throw that in there. But with, just kind of going with the Batwoman, something I just thought about in terms of how they can approach this going forward is I don't think they'll use alternate Earth concepts. I don't. But
yeah, I find that really unlikely.
I think the cleanest way for them, yet again, is to do the face swapping storyline. But at the same time, I think if they just want to hire a new actress, which is hard for me, I can't think of an actress on paper that I think is as perfect visually speaking, like, appearance wise casting as Ruby Rose for the Batwoman role, because Batwoman's a hard ass character in the comics, very military, just very intimidating. Like, she's someone who, when if I were to describe the character to someone who's not familiar, I would say kind of like very hard on the outside but soft on the inside. And I feel like Ruby Rose does a really good job, definitely on paper, portraying that. Like, you see Ruby Rose and she could be very intimidating. Like, you wouldn't want to sit next to her on a bus, so to speak. But at the same time, you could kind of feel that if you talked to her and got to know her, you would have a laugh, have some beers or something. You know what I mean? Like she's not a hard ass through and through, but she can portray it so well. And she does it with John Wick as well. It just I can't think of a better actress. So I don't know if you have anyone in mind, but
I know, I'm trying to pull up the name again. I'm just blanking on names today. There was an actress who was vying for the role on social media.
Oh, I know you're talking about from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Her name is Stephanie Beatrice. Yeah, she was vying for it, and she
was also vying for She-Hulk too at one point.
Yeah, she was. I think she mentioned that she wouldn't be able to do She-Hulk for some reason or another, but I don't know how you'd be able to do Batwoman and not, She-Hulk. But
probably more grueling shooting with 22
It would definitely be a
episodes.
lot more grueling and a lot more of a commitment, but she to me, she looks the part, and it is hard to wrap it around because it was hard to think of this before Ruby Rose was even cast. Like I said previously, I thought she was too big of a name.
It's just such great casting.
When it first came down to it, I thought she was much bigger than that show, than the CW. But if Stephanie Beatrice is down for the role, I mean, get someone in there who's a solid actor and wants to be committed, and that's all you're going to need.
Yeah, I mean, what really hurts, in my opinion, is, I mean, it's already going to be hard for the execs on this show to cast a new Batwoman Because not only are they going to want someone ideally that probably has some similarities to Ruby Rose in some way, shape, or form, you know what I mean? To make the transition as smooth as possible. But then that actress, they already said they wanted to be someone who's publicly already LGBT, which makes it even harder because your circle shrinks a bit. And then on top of that, I mean, you have to find someone in such a short period of time. You know what I mean? Like, at least before the show is ever made, you can take your time doing a casting search, negotiations, whatever. You're on a clock now. I mean, coronavirus, of course, gives you some leeway.
Right, but it's only delayed. So it's only delayed so much. I
Exactly.
mean, a month, 2 months, maybe at the most. I mean, I know they delayed everything to 2021, like early 2021. So you have a few months ahead, but you still had to prep everything and be prepared, and you need this sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and it just sucks because this is the main lead. You know, it's not even a character that you could write out. You know, if like,
And they were banking on her. She was going to be, one of the parts of next year's crossover. She was going to be a major part moving forward as Oliver leaves and as Barry's on his last legs in the universe. Him and Supergirl and Superman were going to be the ones they hinged on going forward, and they're going to have to find someone else to fill it.
We gotta say, Barry may not. So I think this is actually interesting to mention, and I guess this is kind of in its own way becoming somewhat a larger CW discussion. But geez, I swear to God, I will say names correctly on the first time one day. But Grant Gustin, aka Barry Allen on The Flash, is technically not signed for further seasons. The assumption is he will sign, but it is not official currently. Very much like a Dak Prescott on the Cowboys situation, where you expect that he will be the Cowboys QB in the future, but no pen has been
every
on
day
paper.
something else comes out about this, that, and the other.
Exactly.
It makes every day it gets a little more, why haven't you signed yet?
Exactly. And situations like this put more pressure on certain roles like Batwoman, because like you just said, it's very much so the future of the CW hero shows for DC is Supergirl, presumably Batwoman. They've been building that already, the pseudo world's finest kind of thing, basically replacing the pseudo Brave and the Bold dynamic of Arrow and the Flash. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think Grant Gustin, he's kind of made comments that makes it sound like he's ready to bow out if possible.
I give that 2 more seasons at the most.
100%.
I know it's already up for season 7, and I think season 8 may be the last one. They may take the Arrow route and just go out at season 8. And then, that leaves with if Green Arrows and the Canaries doesn't get picked up, which it's seeming unlikely at this point today, you're going to have Batwoman and Legends. Legends only has another season or 2. And then you're going to have Supergirl, Batwoman, Superman, and then whatever else they find to fill. Black Lightning, I suppose, is still going. Yeah. So we're going to have to fill these spots, and they were hinging on something like Batwoman. The CW's never canceled a series before. Arrow, Stephen Amell was done, and he did the 8th season as a favor because they wanted him to do it. But they've never gone outright and canceled a show. But if Batwoman, this doesn't work and ratings fall and all this stuff, I mean, this is not looking good. Losing a lead actress on a show that was already struggling. I mean, Supergirl and Batwoman were struggling last season. Not deservedly so, because I think Batwoman was better than its numbers were, but it's a tough situation. They need to be careful and towing the line here.
Yeah, I think speaking for how I would hope they might approach this is, look, you already have the Canary, Green Arrow, right? That whole thing right there, ready to go. Roll with it. I would do a 1 season, just like Nickelodeon with The Legend of Korra, right? Before that thing became multiple seasons, it was a 1 season miniseries, ended up doing so well, they kept renewing it on a season by season basis. The pros of that, we got more Korra, which at the time was really great. The negatives of that, the story wasn't always super coherent across multiple books. However, with a show like this, The Canary, whatever, I think it could work as 1 season. I think it could work on multiple seasons on a season by season basis. The story might be a lot tighter, which is a problem for certain CW shows not always having beginning, middle, and end, so to speak, as neatly as they could. Usually because of how long the episodes are. And I think we've talked about that before, but I would postpone Batwoman. Don't rush the casting. I mean, this is literally your money-making lead actress. This is the face of your show. Every other cast, crew, role, storyline, whatever for the rest of the series will depend on who you bring in to replace Ruby Rose. So I would postpone that so you don't have to rush that process. At the same time, I would move forward with the Green Arrow Canary show. I would also beg on my hands and knees to get Stephen Amell to do some sort of cameo to at least build hype for the first episode. Not like a regular cameo, but, just like a one and done kind of thing, hype him up and everything, get as many eyes as possible to give that show as a high a chance of success as possible. Do that. Run with that for like a mini series. Maybe don't do a full 22, do like a more Netflix like, condensed 10, 12 episodes, maybe.
Yeah, I've always said they need to cut these shows between 13 to 16 episodes. Legends only does 16 and it's better for it.
Yeah.
Every season you have 5, 6, 7 episodes that are just completely useless and don't add anything to the overarching story, and then they just don't work. I remember one example, and I was talking to a friend about this the other day. Arrow season 5, which is arguably the best season.
Which
the
one
back
is that
half of it
again? Which villain?
Yes, Prometheus.
That was great. Yeah, go on.
The back half of that season is my favorite Arrowverse content. It's incredible, and I loved it to death. But there was one episode, episode 21, I think it was 20 or 21, that ended up being a bottle episode where Felicity and Oliver get trapped in the bunker. And the reason they had to do it was because of budget restrictions on how much they had to spend on the finale. So they shot an entire episode where 2 characters just get stuck in a bunker and have to talk about, their issues. And had that episode not been in the season, it would have been better for it. But because of the 22 limit and how much money they had to spend, they had to add this episode that just was completely useless. And it's kind of a weird stain on an otherwise incredible back half of a season. So it's a bummer that they forced these 22 episodes on them. And I think that, Ruby Rose mentioned that or the reports have mentioned that in the statement, was that she wasn't super committed to a 22 episode commitment because she'd originally signed on for 19 and they upped it to 22, and you have to shoot for 6 to 7 months. So it's like if they cut it back a little bit, it'd just be a lot easier to digest. And I think all the shows would be better for it. Maybe they'd make less money, obviously, but I think quality-wise, the shows would be better.
No, I agree. I mean, also they could just do that, and we've talked about this before, I think, as well. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they approach each season as 2 seasons. So instead of having one extremely drawn out with filler 22 episode order, 24 episode order, they approach it as we have one season of 10 to 12 episodes. That's one storyline. And then second half of the season is another storyline, and it builds off of each other very organically. And I think that, works really well, which is, I can't remember the exact term they use for how they do it, but basically like the Ghost Rider season, right? Started off, it was a Ghost Rider storyline. Then it very organically transitioned the second half of the season, which was a pseudo Age of Ultron, AI, framework, Ada, season. And then Ghost Rider came back, at the end of that to tie it all together as one, overall season. But, anyways, I think you have to push back Batwoman. I think you need to do a mini series order for Green Arrow and the Canaries. Just one and done it. If it does really well, it's awesome. Bring it back again. But you don't have to feel pressure. You know what I mean? And I think also that's better because if you do a more limited order for Green Arrow and the Canaries, sometimes pressure makes diamonds. And you might get a really great show from the writers, from the cast, from the crew, because they know it's like this is their one shot, you can't blow it kind of thing.
No, and they put a lot of eggs in that basket. I mean, they went and got Kate McNamara, who was a big actress on Shadowhunters and a few other things she's been in. And they went her and they were saying, hey, you're going to come lead a new show. And listen, to be honest with you, the pilot, it didn't really work for me. I was excited for the idea of the show, the premise of the show. I very much like Katie Cassidy as Black Siren and Juliana Hargavy as Dinah Lance, and I was excited for them to keep going in the Arrowverse. But the what they set up in the pilot didn't super work for me. So I was a little hesitant to just get it picked up for 22 episodes and throw myself into that. But a short season order would be a lot more interesting to me, I suppose, to kind of see where they can take it as kind of a one and done, like, oh, well, we're going to give this a shot. But I think a lot of it's going to be on Superman and Lois to work as well. That's the next show. They're like, hey, this has to work. If it doesn't, we're going to have to figure out something else. So the Arrowverse is in kind of a flux right now. You know, it was so stable for 6-7 years, and now it's just kind of like, well, where do we go from here?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the second half of my plan would actually be doing a Wally West Flash centric miniseries as well. He was traveling for X amount time period, so I would do a miniseries focusing on that, kind of building the Wally West character, low key acting as a backdoor pilot, test audiencing Wally West basically for I would do 6 to 8 episodes for that probably. So you could tell just a nice, neat story. Who the villain would be, I don't really know, top of my head, but my whole focus of that would be to test with the audiences. If I was the CW, how are people receptive to Wally West in the CW leading his own series? Do people gravitate towards it? Do people watch it? If they do watch it, is it well received? Because at this point, like we kind of said, Grant Gustin is on his final legs in terms of doing the Flash. He sounds like he's ready to move on to other projects. Now is your time to figure out, are we going to do a legacy character thing, kind of like Green Arrow and the Canaries, or are we going to be just wrapping it up? So, I would do my best with that, or, if it doesn't do well, maybe prep yourself for a Bart Allen show in the future, having Bart Allen as Kid Flash. Instead, introduce Bart Allen in the final season or two, get a really good actor to, portray him too, so he has marketability. I don't know what they're going to do, but they need to do something to prepare for the future of whatever the big three of the DC shows are supposed to look like, basically, is my point. But yeah, do you have any other final thoughts on the whole recasting CW stuff before we tie it up with the final Snyder Cut thing?
I just hope they go about this the right way and don't rush into anything just because they lost a major actress. It's not doomsday yet, so they just gotta make sure they go about this the right way.
Yeah, and actually, let me say really quick, a great actress that could have replaced Ruby Rose, cannot anymore, is the actress you listed who is portraying Oliver and Felicity's daughter. It's Kate McMara, right?
Kate McNamara.
I would screw it up, and I feel so bad. It's one of those.
Yeah, it's a complicated last name. I only.
But when I'm saying on top of my head, I only. But I think she actually, if she dyed her hair red, which I don't know if she'd be in favor of. Well, I guess technically it's
she's a good up and No, yeah. It's a wig. She's a really good up and coming actress, and I enjoyed her portrayal as Mia Smoke. It got better towards the end for sure. The Crisis stuff was really emotional, especially the last few episodes of Arrow. So she's someone I would love to keep around the Arrowverse if Green Arrows and Carrie doesn't work, but obviously she's tied into that rather than Batwoman. But they need to find somebody. There's somebody out there that wants to play Batwoman.
Somebody. It's like the old DirecTV commercial. Someone out there loves you. It's like someone out there is going to play Batwoman.
Someone is out there right now, and they will play Batwoman.
Yeah, and hopefully, I wish the best for the series, not only for that actress's, career, but for the cast and crew that are reliant on that lead role to be.
Yeah, obviously, it's such a big production, and someone the spearhead of it, the face of it leaving is not a great thing.
But yeah, the last topic we have, returning to the Snyder Cut stuff. So kind of a little detour we took, I guess, in that conversation. We're talking about how this more so affects really the future of the DC films, the DC EU. For example, this happened during the Man of Steel watch party, so let's just talk about that really quick, right out the bat. Man of Steel 2, I think this could lead into a Man of Steel 2 production announcement in the future, depending on how things progress. I'm going to let you kind of talk about it a little bit because, before recording, you brought up the agent and stuff like that. So I don't know if you want to let the audience kind of know what you were referencing before.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation. We're gonna, the Snyder Cut. I want to word this properly so I don't have to come back to this and feel bad about what I said. But we're entering this age now that we're entering this age now where the Snyder Cut coming in is gonna clearly make an effect on the DCEU. And from what we know of the DCEU prior, that they were moving past the Snyder stuff and pushing away from the Snyder stuff. Going into this next era, they wanted to kind of get a clean slate, but it's clear that the actors and people who signed on and other people had this vision in mind. And that included things like Supergirl and a Man of Steel 2 and Suicide Squad, being more in line with the Justice League and the BVS that had come out before it. And it's definitely a complicated situation. And I think Snyder coming in and getting in good with WB and these new these new executives could lead to a much bigger role down the line. And I think when talking about the Snyder Cut and its actual existence and him having creative control of it and then releasing it, I think we're entering this age where maybe Zack Snyder finds his way back into the DCEU, whether it be on characters he's already worked on, whether it be on a Man of Steel 2, whether it be on a crazy potential Justice League sequel for all we know. So I think all the options are open.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first hear this, Henry Cavill, it's worth noting his agent is The Rock's ex-wife, who
Danny Garcia,
who they're on great terms. It's not anything bad like that, but they're on great terms, and she actually runs The Rock's $7 Productions with him. I think she's the CEO of it, and The Rock is more of like kind of the example I would use is The Rock is like the El Presidente from Barstool, right? He's the face of it, very much so. He's still very active in it, and the CEO of Barstool is what Garcia is, basically. She runs the actual more kind of business, day-to-day, all that stuff. Now, she was actually not publicizing, but she was promoting Henry Cavill's, joining of the stream. She did a little winky face thing in terms of it, kind of teasing, maybe this might be something that leads to something else. And The Rock has also been really friendly and really great with Henry Cavill, supporting his Superman interpretation, advocating for certain things like either Man of Steel 2, Black Adam appearing, them having a fight sequence, or, Superman appearing in Black Adam and them having a fight sequence. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but didn't The Rock and / or $7 Productions co-produce in some aspects Shazam?
I believe so. He's very much connected, and the group is to Black Adam, Shazam, and the DCU in general.
Yeah, and The Rock, for those who don't know, I mean, The Rock, his transcendence in Hollywood is legendary. I mean, this dude has pull. You know what I mean? Like, if The Rock wants something done in a movie that he's affiliated in, it's going to get done. No one's really saying no to The Rock. I mean, you got to be a big guy in the film business to be saying no to a superstar like The Rock at this point in his career. This isn't Tooth Fairy anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is low-key kinda also The Rock helping in terms of getting things moving, more so for Henry Cavill in Man of Steel 2 than the Snyder Cut, just because in this situation, Man of Steel 2 is to Deadpool what The Rock is to Hugh Jackman. You know what I mean? Like, it's not really publicized all too much, but you ask Ryan Reynolds about it and he'll tell you, without Hugh Jackman, we would not have Deadpool. So,
all right, I think the stars are aligning to where a Man of Steel 2 is a viable option. I think that people, after The Witcher, and I know we've talked about this before, after The Witcher and, the all the Snyder Cut stuff, and let's say, hey, we have not seen Henry Cavill's true portrayal of Superman from what was in the Snyder Cut on screen yet. We saw what Joss Whedon shot. We saw all the mustache stuff. That stuff was all tainted. It was all thrown out, and it didn't work for a lot of people. Definitely didn't work for me. And I think, going in here and seeing what Snyder's vision was for the character in his next arc, his third movie in the next piece of his arc, I thought it was, BVS was a misstep for the character in my mind. He wasn't in it enough. He didn't do enough. But moving into Justice League, where he would come back to life and have this bigger role to play, I think there's a lot of room to move forward with Henry Cavill back in this role a role he deserves to continue to play, and to give him another shot at a solo movie. And listen, Zack Snyder wouldn't be my first choice to come back and direct, but having him produce it, I think would be important. I think, getting those aspects of Krypton that we got that everyone loves. I mean, that was, Krypton has never looked better, never felt better, never been better than it was in Man of Steel. And I think we need more of that. And I think putting, Man of Steel 2 in development is the right move to make.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would do it after, Zack Snyder's Justice League comes out, but I do think it's worth mentioning. We touched upon this earlier, that the new Warner Media CEO, and I guess the execs as a whole, they're very pro Snyder compared to the previous ones. So if Snyder can get back in the good graces of WB, I think that increases the percentage of getting a Man of Steel 2 versus a rumored reboot that had been circulating amongst circles, for a lot, that they were going to be kind of moving away from Henry Cavill's depiction. And I think a lot of other things work in Henry's favor too. Not only that, but the fact that The Witcher was a huge success. Mission Impossible was a huge success. Having more of those successes behind him, I think also really helps his argument for having another Superman movie, because you can, if it's an issue of being a box office draw, you can draw that up. And I think something else worth mentioning as well, and Snyder yet again hinted towards it, is that Man of Steel 2 may have originally been planned to include in some way, shape, or form Supergirl. Which would have been really interesting, because you have the whole situation of, someone escaped the pod. And I think beforehand, Zack Snyder said very bluntly that was Supergirl, and that she's basically been living on Earth, pseudo-immortal style for the last 1,000, years or so, or couple thousand years, and all that stuff. Or there was like a graphic novel, like a prelude that showed the scout ship landing, and Kara Zor-El was one of the people on it, something like that. I can't remember the exact thing because it was so many years ago now, but it seems like it was always planned at one point. Snyder wanted to introduce Supergirl and do Brainiac as the villain and like all that stuff. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that was a very interesting story, and I think the timing is a little weird given that report a couple weeks ago about how they may have scrapped Supergirl in lieu of doing the Superman reboot.
Wow, yeah, I forgot about that. That's very true.
Yeah, that came out, but then you listen to Snyder talk, and it's clear that he's in with WB. He clearly has in some type of situation where he has knowledge of things, and he kept saying, hey, during the watch party just today, hey, stay tuned. The Supergirl stuff, stay tuned. And people are like, what is he talking about? Why would he say that? Because, they didn't realize what was coming at the end, where he was saying, hey, I'm back. We're doing the Snyder Cut. Let's do it. And then we're like, well, hey, maybe he knows more than he's leading on. And he's saying that, hey, maybe the Zack Snyder-esque, Supergirl is on the way.
My theory on that, based on everything we know and have heard, I 100% would believe a situation occurred where basically the whole making a solo, non-related, from what I understand, Supergirl movie was put on hold and put on the back burner as soon as it was officially greenlit to do the Snyder Cut. I 1000% believe that, because I think it's also 1000% in effect that if they do a Man of Steel 2, I don't think Zack Snyder would direct it. I think he would produce it. I
don't think he'll ever direct another DCEU movie. Whether that means he's involved or not is a completely different situation.
I think 100% he would produce it, executive produce it, and I think he'd be a rather hands-on executive producer. Let me add that. I don't think he would just be like Nolan, whose name might be on it and he might help with the initial story outline, but that's it. I think Snyder would be an active participant in it. The cast and crew seem to love him and love his presence, and they have tons of really heartfelt stories of interactions on set. So I think he'd be a part of it in that way, but I do think another director would kind of fill that role, so to speak. And I think Zach would probably pick the director as well, or at least give his blessing for the director, something like that. But I 100% believe if they do a Man of Steel 2, the villain would be Brainiac. And I also 1000% believe in the deep roots of my heart that it would be Supergirl as a supporting character introduced as well. I 1000% believe that, because the amount of world building that has occurred for Supergirl, the amount of world building Zack has included for Brainiac as well. A lot of people don't really notice this, but there is a lot of subtle Brainiac references in Man of Steel.
Absolutely.
Depending on what depiction of Brainiac you would like to, look on, but it's out there. It's definitely out there, and honestly, yeah, Supergirl would be a great character for a Man of Steel 2. I would think thematically, in terms of, you have a character, and I guess if you do it the Man of Steel version, she wouldn't really be the young naive Supergirl, right? Because she would have been around Earth for
No,
thousands
right.
of
It would be a
years.
much different depiction.
That'd be really interesting. So maybe it wouldn't be. They'd have to retcon that probably, because I don't see them doing that. I could see them maybe doing more of a Kara Zor-El that, like, my whole pitch of it, right? If I were to do it, in like a minute or less, it would be she was already captured by Brainiac as the last surviving Kryptonian. Then Brainiac realizes there's another surviving Kryptonian, but this surviving Kryptonian has like more quote unquote worth to him, right? Because it's Superman. He's, he defeated Steppenwolf, yada 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 yada. So the value of having that in your collection goes up automatically. So I could see something where Brainiac uses Supergirl to more or less kind of trap Superman to capture him. And you could have a whole thing, where Supergirl's like an unwitting servant of Brainiac helping to capture Superman. Something like that. A storyline like that, where in that case, Brainiac's your real antagonist, of course, but you can also have the inevitable fight scene featuring Superman and Supergirl, because they're gonna have to have that in some way, shape, or form. You get to have that. It could work in the context of the story, and then the story can end with Superman and Supergirl joining forces to defeat Brainiac. I definitely think that could work. Something like that could work in some way, shape, or form. I mean, how would you do it in terms of introducing Supergirl?
I think you have to explain why she wouldn't have come during Man of Steel. Zod does that broadcast, where he comes in and says, "Hey, like Kal-El of Krypton, come, give yourself up, or we're going to destroy the world," that kind of thing. And why wouldn't she have heard that? I think something that just popped in my mind a little bit. I know there was a storyline they'd done it in animation. I know it involved Darkseid, where Kara ends up on Themyscira, fighting alongside the Amazonians, and she trains there for a while. But that was when she was initially found. Yeah. But I think maybe there's a scenario where she was there, where she's not in front of a TV. She's not living in modern society. I suppose she's off on secluded island, and maybe she comes out, or maybe she's lost her memory. Something like that, where she has to realize who she is and join up with Clark and fight Brainiac, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I'd like to see too is, I guess, Mon-El and Daxam, because they mentioned in Man of Steel. I mean, because anything they do in Man of Steel 2, you would imagine would be building off more so Man of Steel
versus you would hope so.
BVS and Justice League. I mean, obviously, Superman has a lot of character development from those other movies, but narratively, you would think you would stem more from the Man of Steel film. But they touched a lot on the old outposts and terraforming other planets that they did. And I know Daxam was referenced in Man of Steel in like the art book or something like that, not necessarily directly in the movie, but it'd be cool if they maybe had Daxamites and Daxam, appear. I think that'd be really cool. But I think it's inevitable, Supergirl coming. There's just been, it's that saying, when there's smoke, there's fire. And there's been so much smoke, both from Snyder and in general at WB. I think having Supergirl appear in a Man of Steel 2 works out really well, because then they could still do your Supergirl movie. You know what I mean? If it goes really well, the reception's really positive, but I don't see how they do Man of Steel 2 without her. And I'm going to leave it at that. But another thing I want to touch upon with the future of the DC films, DCEU, with this whole Snydercut thing happening and Snyder potentially having more creative influence again in the whole DC films. I don't think he's going to influence Matt Reeves' Batman. I don't think we're getting another Batfleck, don't get me wrong. But I'd be curious to see WB doing what I would call the apology tour If they did some sort of Ayer cut for Suicide Squad, I wouldn't be mad at it. Actually, I would really want that, because there's three specific things about Ayer's original vision of the Suicide Squad movie I really want to see. First and foremost is that there was originally more Batman in it, I guess, and they touched upon Batman killing the Joker and Harley Quinn killing Robin, and that is why Harley Quinn is in jail. That is why the Joker has damage on him, because I guess he wrote that as a joke to Batman, because Batman, when he was beating the hell out of the Joker, ruined his face, ruined his smile, so the Joker can't really smile anymore, which I guess is also why he has like the hand tattoo thing. So, there's a whole backstory behind that, and I guess the reason why in BVS Batman is in the penthouse thing he's in instead of Wayne Manor is because I guess while he was fighting the Joker or something relating to Jason's death in the DCEU that originally was going to be touched upon, I think in a flashback, either in BVS or Suicide Squad, but I think it was in Suicide Squad, they were going to show Wayne Manor being burnt down during this whole, Batman versus Joker kind of thing. And I guess also Jared Leto's Joker, love him or hate him, had a lot more scenes, and the I'm going to say this word right. I'm going to try it one more time. Chronologically, the placement of certain scenes with Jared Leto's Joker was out of place in the theatrical version. That's what I've heard. And that's one big thing I would love to see in Ayer's original vision. 2, the original tone. If you look at the original teaser for Suicide Squad versus the later trailers, it's night and day. I was really excited at first for Suicide Squad because I thought it would have more of a vibe similar to the movie he made, Fury. I don't know if you saw that, Jackson.
Yeah, I absolutely love Fury. It's
Fury
incredible.
To me was your textbook Suicide Squad. I mean, when I saw
yeah, it's a band of misfits getting into a situation where they have to fight their way out. It's very, that misfit kind of, the kind of Western kind of feel of getting a ragtag group together to take on a bigger threat is really timeless. Yeah. And I think, Ayer did kind of capture that in Fury.
So I was really thinking that would kind of transplant in Suicide Squad in a lot of ways. But the third reason, the reason why Snyder coming more back in the good graces of WB really, I think, could have really big effects on this is because originally Suicide Squad was going to lead into Justice League. It wasn't being made just to be made. It actually had a place in the narrative overall. And the place in the narrative was those creatures, those weird eye-like creatures that, serve Enchantress, right? Originally, they were going to be parademons. And originally, Enchantress was going to be, I think, some sort of pseudo-apocalyptic character. That's what she was going to be Enchantress and all that stuff, but her character's roots were going to be apocalyptic. And instead of her brother being that big CGI bad guy, it was going to be Steppenwolf. And they were going to be making not just some random energy beam portal, but it was going to be a mother box-like portal to bring Steppenwolf and the invasion to Earth. That originally was what was going on in the Suicide Squad. It was basically a precursor to the narrative of Justice League, with the mother boxes and all that stuff, making a bridge for Steppenwolf's army to come through. So the fact that we didn't get that, and just how much we know was deliberately changed to make Suicide Squad not connected to the Snyder kind of verse, if you want to call it that narrative. Those are the reasons I would also really be interested in seeing an Ayer cut, so to speak. And I don't know if, from what I understand, it was all filmed. So it would be a better situation actually than Snyder's in terms of they wouldn't need to do reshoots on anything. It would just be correcting some CGI and recutting the film as originally it was supposed to be. I can't speak to the quality of it, of course, whether it'd be better received or not, but I would love to see it for those reasons. I mean, I don't know, Jackson, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the Ayer cut is something a little more even sort of not as mysterious as the Snyder cut, but it's one of those things that was like, well, he had this a whole other version too. I mean, this one to me is more comparable like the Josh Trank cut of Van Forstick, where it was like, the director claims that there is this much better version of the film out there, and that we're not getting to see it, which was which is frustrating. So where it's like, it's It's something that I hope maybe down the line we get to see, but I think that's a situation where it might be much, much further. There's obviously not the backing behind the Ayer cut like there is the Snyder cut online, so I think it probably wouldn't have done them as much good if they've attempted to do this with the Ayer cut rather than the Snyder cut. But this definitely does open the door, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%. I think also a lot of it, first and foremost, nothing's going to get done, I don't think, overnight. If the Snyder cut is super well received, let's say the Snyder cut for HBO Max, right, breaks every conceivable record somehow on HBO Max, and people are clamoring for more, 1000%, I would believe they would do the Ayer cut, especially if the fans right now start being as active and, proactive, I should say, more so about, hashtag release the Ayer cut, and David Ayer himself has been a little bit more open to talking. And my theory is that David Ayer has been talking a little bit more about it because he saw what's going on with Snyder. So maybe he's a little bit more open to speaking out about it now because the old suits are gone. And
yeah, potentially, for sure.
And maybe he feels deep down, he can speak more freely on it again and talk about the truth of what happened to Suicide Squad. I mean, if people think Justice League is a different film, Suicide Squad, theatrical versus original vision that was filmed for, night and day. Like there was I heard 30-40 minutes worth of Joker footage removed. I mean, whether you love or hate Leto's version of the Joker, that's a crap ton of footage gone. So, man, I don't know. I mean, I heard some of those montage scenes. I mean, there was one scene in particular for Leto's Joker that probably was better left removed, which is like him peeing on Harley or something like that. But
yeah, there was some weird stuff in there as well.
Like, there's some weird stuff probably better left unseen. But at the same time, probably some of that montage stuff they had was more fleshed out, and it just got, put into that colorful montage in Suicide Squad to save time. So I would have loved to have seen that. Maybe the movie would be a lot better received that way. I know originally before, so here's my thing, right? There is a film ending before reshoots, and there's a film after reshoots. And before the reshoots they did that were further from Ayer's original vision, Diablo wasn't killed. That's a big change as well.
Yeah, and that's something he talked about just on Twitter, I think this week or last week.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I'm saying in terms of this would also very much be a different film. And I think to the question you posed in our first topic, I think it would supersede the canon. And I think Warner should do it. The more I say it, if they're going to be doing the Snyder Cut thing, I think they should do this as well for Suicide Squad. Maybe you can say it's kind of a kiss and make up apology for the directors and for the people they screwed, trying to be more Marvel-like at the time instead of embracing their creators. I think that would go a long way, with the fan base and with those creators as well. And also at the same time, I think it would just be a great way of making amends. And the best part about it in my eyes is, look, you do this for Justice League, you do it for Suicide Squad, whether you make a Man of Steel 2 or not, there is nothing. I don't think a fan could tweet and complain about a single thing ever again about WB's treatment of Snyder, of Ayer, because if they do these two things, that's you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing better you can do.
Absolutely.
And then if you want to release everything bundled up, Marvel did it with the Infinity Saga, Star Wars did it with the Skywalker Saga, the Snyder Saga, we're gonna get a Snyder Saga.
Hey, it's another avenue to make money.
So I mean, and at the end of the day, that's all they care about is making money. And the situation we're in right now, and I'm gonna end it off on this, my thoughts, and I'm gonna turn it to you before we just end the whole podcast out, because I think this is our longest yet. So editing this will be interesting. But we're in a situation content-wise where a lot of films are frozen in their production. Studios are doing their best to try retrofitting things to fit certain guidelines for COVID-19 and all that stuff, but nothing is, set in stone. And even if stuff starts filming tomorrow, it probably will be moving at a much slower pace in terms of what they were doing before, because they have to be so careful. and things are going to be pushed back. So in my opinion, if you can put an extra, actually you probably wouldn't need to put 20 to 30 because you're not doing as extensive reworking as you are for the Snyder Cut. But besides the Snyder Cut, if you could get the ball rolling low key on an Ayer cut of Suicide Squad, I would do it for the sheer fact that you're getting content out there. And, especially if the Snyder Cut thing does really well, you're going to look really good. Also doing the Ayer cut. I mean, the fans are going to applaud. Like, no one's going to say anything negative, I don't think. Fans will applaud you. I mean, you're not reinventing the wheel here. This has happened with Blade Runner. This has happened with Superman 2. You know what I mean? Like, they've done these Ultimate Editions, director recuts before. So that's just my 2 cents on it. Oddly enough, Blade Runner and Superman 2, both franchises, including either Jared Leto or DC characters. Go figure. But, Jackson, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on this topic before we wrap it up.
It's like I said at the top, this is, it's a shocking development and one that I'm welcoming and attempting to, come in with open arms and just seeing where we can take this and where, what the Snyder Cut can bring in the next year. And I think that's it. I think I made my penance.
Your penance. Yeah. Okay. So I think that pretty much wraps it up. This is a very long conversation, so I'm curious to see how long each segment will end up being. But Jackson, thanks for being available for this and everything. It's great to have that continuation from the last episode discussion.
Had to come back and discuss my opinions.
Exactly. In terms of all the DC stuff, though, I just think it's a great time to be a fan, especially if you're a DC fan, especially if you're a fan of the Snyder Cut stuff. If you were a fan on social media, tweeting day in, day out, congratulations. Your hard work, I guess you could say, has been rewarded. But at the same time, I think we need to be measured in the steps we take going forward, just because there was a lot of harassment, a lot of, lack for a better word, verbal abuse and stuff like that to a lot of people on social media over this movement. And I think we should just take this time to be grateful, I guess, and reverent that we're getting it, because this is something that I think if you asked a lot of people, definitely a year ago, it was still a no. But, before the beginning of 2020, you asked people about this, it was a less than 1% chance kind of thing. So the fact that we're getting this 1 in a million opportunity of getting the Snyder Cut, I think for fans, we should be really grateful, really excited, and just not do anything to screw it up, so to speak. Because you don't put $20, $30 million in something willingly, or not willingly, but, you don't do that, without having...
Yeah, you don't do it
without reason, but also you don't do that just to do it. So, this is probably a very sensitive production, and, we don't want to... just like you made it happen with your words, you don't want to make it unhappen with your words, if you know what I mean. But I doubt they'd pull the plug on this kind of thing. Anyways...
No, after an official announcement,
type of hyped up announcement, there's no way. But I'm just saying in general, let's be as cool as we can about the whole thing, and not give people reasons to look negatively on this whole thing, because this could inspire other movies in the future, other movements in the future, based on the success of this. So let's I guess be an example to aspire towards, as Snyder Superman would probably say. But anyways, Jackson, thanks for being here. For those who've listened to the whole thing, thanks for listening to it. If you're listening to it on any of the podcasting platforms, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc., let me know which podcast platform you're listening to on. I'm really curious. If you're listening to it on YouTube, thanks for watching the whole thing. I know it's rather long, so I really do appreciate the patience and the, being willing to listen to our voices. I've been told by someone my voice makes you sleepy. So... hopefully people are still awake, but thanks for listening. Let us know your thoughts down below on the topics, the Snyder Cut stuff, future DC films, and Batwoman recasting. And with all that said and done, we'll see you guys later. Jackson, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at JacksonHayes67 and follow Full Circle at Full Circle Cine, and just check out our work at FullCircleCinema.com.
Sweet. Yeah, so talk to you all later, and we'll see you guys next episode.